Okay, I'll introduce. Well, obviously, you know, Mark who Mark is. Next, Mark is Neil Anderson, who's the marketing director at Kingsland Drinks, another major bottling company, but also sort of brand development business. Dennis Hornibrook, who's the founder of Vinex, which is a bulk wine trading platform, the first digital online trading platform. And Robin Copestick, who's the managing director of Copestick Murray, which is wine brand development agency business. So they're all involved in the handling, the movement, the buying, the shipping, and the selling of bulk wine in different ways. So we're going to explore how their models work and the opportunities and challenges they potentially see in the market. Could I perhaps just start off, because obviously I can introduce your businesses, but I know that your businesses are all very quite distinct and unique. So perhaps if you just start off by explaining how your business models have had to change or adapt to cope with the demand in bulk wine over the years. So perhaps, Robin, if you want to start off with how Copestick Murray has changed from when you first started it to where you are now.
How long have I got? It could be a very long answer, but I'll try and keep it short. We changed our business model rapidly in about 2010-11, when instead of creating brands for other people, we decided we should do it for ourselves. And we were lucky enough to come up with the idea for iHeart. And that changed our business quite rapidly because the success of the brand was very quick, and it meant that we had to quickly find sources for large amounts of wine, and that has resulted in centralised bottling. The bottling is not actually done in the UK; it's done in Germany, but it's the same principle. And the advantages for that are a sort of central source, so it means our customers can collect from one location. I think it's very important to recognise the fact that we can control the quality a lot better when everything is done at one source. A lot of people think that you're sometimes sacrificing quality when you're doing bulk wine. I happen to think it's the opposite. I think you can control it a lot better, and I think quality is obviously significantly important for any brand of any product in any industry. So yeah, I mean, our business changed quickly. We knew very, very soon that we had a success on our hands, and through a chance meeting with a German company called Henkel, they took the decision to buy 60% of us in September 2013, and then they bought the remaining 40% in May 2016. When they bought us, we were turning over about £15 million. Last year was £55 million. iHeart last year sold globally just over 15 million bottles. So there's been a very quick growth of the company, and actually I would put that all down to iHeart. I'd put it all down to Henkel having the confidence in us to buy us, and we're probably only at the beginning of a very exciting journey. So looking forward to the next few years.
Can I ask you, in terms of how the model, when you were 2008, 2009 to 9, how much of your business is now sort of bulk wine focused, and how much of it is bringing in actual brands and bottles and bottled wine, basically?
Roughly last year would be, we sold about 35 million bottles last year, and about 25 million would be bottled either in the UK or Germany.
Actually, I'll go to Neil next, because obviously similar model to Mark. Perhaps Neil, do you want to talk through how Kingsland Drinks? I know before you were there, they were perhaps a different kind of business to how they are now. But perhaps if you could talk about how Kingsland Drinks has developed and its own business model over the last 10 years, I guess.
I think the key change that's happened in the last probably 3 years, apart from obviously doing the logistical elements of bulk wine shipping and bottling in the UK, the key thing that I think I felt when I came to Kingsland Drinks, and others were thinking at the same time, is actually the wine industry needs to listen to what consumers are saying. And I think one of the key things that we've brought to the marketplace, and working very closely with a lot of our retailers, is actually investing quite a lot of money in insight and actually listening to what consumers want. We've always felt that, you know, the wine industry does a fantastic job, but actually compared to a lot of other industries, does it listen to consumers' needs and requirements as much as it should do? And I still feel like we are making, and I can see other companies making definitely advancements in this area about actually listening to consumers' needs and requirements. But I still think there's a lot more that needs to be done. So I think that's one of the key elements of change that we've kind of adopted over the last 3 years, and it's definitely worked very well for us. But it's listening to consumers, it's working very closely with the retailers, understanding their strategies. But as I said, the more that you can talk about consumers' needs and requirements for particular retailers, I think that you're in a better place.
We'll come back to the whole consumer insight piece a little bit later on. But perhaps Mark as well, if you could just do a similarly talk about how Broadland Wineries has changed from when you first started to what it is now, if you were doing a...
In 2006, we were a pure play contract packer working for PLB, Bottle Green, D&D. From those names, you'll recognise why those companies no longer exist as standalone entities. They all went bust. So we could see that the days of the pure play agent was, disaggregation, internet coming along, that we needed to start working directly for retailers. So that's what we started to do. So we went from 8 million turnover in 2006 to 60 million turnover last year. And we started to buy bulk wine. We started to pack wine and develop brands for retailers. Very much to Neil's point, in the last 2 to 3 years, we've been investing in a lot of Kantar and Nielsen data, started to conduct a lot of our own focus groups. So we could go to retailers and say, look, here's the evidence, here's the focus groups, this is why we believe this will work. This is a gap in your category, we think. We'd like to test this. So I think now we're just selling finished goods to retailers, and we're branching out into the US and Europe, where we're getting a lot of visibility of good ideas from other countries, which is helping a lot as well.
So it's interesting, because all of you, I suppose, have picked up on the fact that improved intelligence or a better understanding of how the market actually works, as opposed to necessarily going where the currency exchange or the volumes are, is very much at the heart of that. And I suppose, Dennis, with Vinex, you've brought an intelligence-based platform as opposed to how people... So perhaps if people don't know Vinex, if you could explain what Vinex does and why you thought there's a gap in the market for your kind of product.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Thanks, Richard. We haven't changed our business model. We set about 4 years ago to address the changes that we saw happening in the market, and really to try and advance the market. So we believed that there was an opportunity to provide more market transparency around pricing and inventory levels. We saw an opportunity to perhaps better, or to empower buyers more with their knowledge and access to the market. We saw an opportunity to connect more buyers and more sellers together in real time around the world. And yesterday, we heard from Florian talking about concentration and globalization of the industry. We heard from Clive about, if you stand still, you're going to be overtaken. This all sort of sums up what's happening. And, I think it was Bob Dylan wrote his lyrics to The Times Are A-Changing in 1964. Really, in the wine sector, he perhaps should have not written those 50 years ago or over 50 years ago, but perhaps more around 30, 25 years ago, because since then the change has really increased and it's got faster. And so, look, Vinex saw an opportunity to draw on, more than 3 decades of experience with my partner and I, and try and digitise conventional processes and try and connect the market and make the market more fluid, bring more purity to the market, more objectivity to the market in assessment, and ultimately more connection and empower more buyers and sellers to connect and complete trades. So that's the opportunity that we saw 4 years ago.
So essentially people can post up, if you're a producer, you can post up the amount of wine you have, and if you're a buyer, you can go on and it's a bit like dating for bulk wine to some extent.
Sure. It's bringing together both sides of the market. We know there's, the power in the market has historically, or certainly, back in the 80s, that the power was, and before that was all with producers. They could sell everything they could make. With consolidation of retail, with the world economy advancing, and the strength of retailing growing, we've seen the power shift to buyers, and we've all had to bow to the big buyers in the world. In the last 25 years, of course, what's happened with supply in this last 2 years in the global wine industry has really brought power back to the producer. So it's interesting to sort of see the sharing of the power, and we can now see the consolidation that's happening that Florian alluded to yesterday with the likes of Le Granchet and Castel, and they are changing the market as well and wrestling that power back to a supply base. So Vinex is trying to address those by literally providing a secure, high-performing marketplace to bring those together and allow negotiation to take place.
Well, we heard yesterday from Clive Donaldson at Morrison's that, in a way, he was potentially sort of throwing not the gauntlet, I suppose, but he was making it quite clear to suppliers that the power is necessarily in their hands, providing they can come up with the solutions they're looking for. Robin, do you want to talk through, because I know you've obviously worked with lots of the major supermarkets in terms of developing their ranges, both branded and private label. How best do you capture that opportunity, and what do you think, in your view, you can do to make a retailer's life better or easier?
I think a few people here have made the point already, because it's not really about selling to the buyer, it's finding a product or a concept that works for the buyer's consumer. And I think the wine trade generally is getting a lot better at understanding the market and understanding the consumers. And if you can show any buyer that you have a product that their consumer will buy and it will make them the margin required, that buyer would be quite foolish not to listen to you. But so it's a question of them trusting us as the supplier, our insight, our data, and our expertise. And that's the key. It's no longer a case of just picking up a bottle of nice Rioja and putting it on a buyer's table and saying this is a nice bottle of wine. You've got to understand why their consumer will actually buy it.
Which sounds great, and it sounds like, but obviously that's in my experience, the wine trade, there's quite a lack of consumer data. I mean, compared to working in the FMCG sector. I don't come across a lot of wine consumer data very often in my role as a journalist. So perhaps if you could look at how much more are you now investing in consumer data, and what actually does that look like? I mean, in terms of expenditure and what you actually do for consumer data.
Before we launch any major product, we always do a lot of sort of work on focus groups. So we'll put. So, for example, when we did I Heart, we put Hardy's, Echo Falls, Blossom Hill on a shelf. We got 50 consumers from supermarkets, and we asked them to choose which wine they would choose. And luckily, genuinely, the vast majority did say they would choose I Heart as their first choice, and a lot of people chose it as second choice. That data then enabled us to go and show the supermarkets that I Heart was worth a place on the shelf. So it's as simple as doing that, but then of course there's retrospective data, so there's things like Dunnhumby and Nielsen, Kantar, where you can see what trends and what's happening in the market. But if we're launching anything, then we will often do some quite focused and specific work with the consumers of those products.
Neil, with Kingsland, you've done a lot of work, haven't you, around consumer segmentation and planning? I know you've...
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, you know, perhaps rather than tell me all about it again,
Here we go.
you can tell the rest of the world about it. But,
Well, no, we have. I think I've already mentioned the key thing that we've done at Kingsland is actually listen to consumers, and we've invested a lot of money. We've got a thing called Wine Pro that just goes deeper than just talking about consumers. The key thing about consumers. Oh, hello. The key thing about consumers is a lot of the research that I noticed when I came into the wine industry a few years back now was people talked about consumers and they described what the consumer was, but that's just not good enough because as consumers we all act and behave differently on different occasions. So understanding that is a really powerful thing. And just to put it into some context, we spend a lot of time actually taking a lot of buyers from a lot of retailers to actually stand in front of their category and look at their category. And a lot of the wine, certainly 5 years ago, pretty much looked the same, roughly the same price, going after the same consumer on the same occasion, which is just crazy. And in fairness, I think there's been a lot of change going on now at a retail level. You're seeing a lot more products that look different, are more exciting, more engaging. I think you can stand in front of a category now and start to work out, that's for a special occasion, et cetera, et cetera. So it's definitely moving.
was that quite a brave thing to do, though, to tell a retailer that their range isn't particularly...
Well, we didn't tell them. we were hoping that they were going to come to that conclusion when they stood in front of the.
Is it more about, I guess, than all the other major categories in a supermarket, be it laundry, biscuits, crisps? They all have major brands who do a lot of the category management work. And is it a case of the wine trade catching up a little bit to that category management leadership role, which hasn't been there a great deal outside of the Diageos and Pernots before?
Exactly that. I mean, in fairness, the exercise we actually did was actually look at other categories and actually work out who they thought, what consumers they were for, and what occasions. And everyone kind of, you got to a complete array of different consumers, different occasions that you weren't getting, standing in front of the wine fixture. So it's definitely moving in a positive direction. There's still such a huge opportunity to engage with consumers versus other categories. The one thing about wine versus some other categories, brands are very important and brands are always going to have a role to play within any category. But actually, when you look at wine, actually the top 10 wine brands, whilst they engage with consumers, they don't do bonding as well as a lot of other categories. So the opportunity for a lot of suppliers within wine, a lot of opportunity for a lot of retailers is to bring out really engaging wine propositions that properly connect with consumers. So there's huge opportunity.
And perhaps, Mark, you pick up on this. I mean, you've all talked about your own growth rates, which are all very impressive in their own. But also, if you put them together, it's a pretty impressive. And a lot of that obviously been driven by bulk wine, which I suppose if you talk to people who aren't at this conference, who are looking in from out far, which we know the wine trade does have a slight superiority complex when it comes to bulk wine. The fact that a lot of that work, as Clive Donaldson said yesterday, is being facilitated by bulk wine. So perhaps, Mark, you could perhaps talk about where you see the opportunity going next. And obviously you're doing a lot more work now with restaurants and smaller groups, not just all the retailers. Perhaps talk about the wider opportunity there is with bulk wine and serving other parts of the industry.
I told you I was a slow thinker. Well, I think smaller organisations, fragmentation, if you take the on-trade, they have to provide a significantly better experience than staying at home. So what makes, for someone running an on-trade establishment, they can have an array of wines, but a lot of on-trade establishments in London now, for example, are themed. And they have a particular theme. So do they really want to sell wines that are just generic or brands, or do they want some wines that go to that theme? because there's sort of an immersive experience that people are looking for when they go to a particular Argentinian steakhouse or a theatre. So I think you can look at the benefit of bulk wine is it gives you this great flexibility to pack into many different formats. I can see different formats emerging. Staggered, the 75 centilitre glass bottle. I can't think of many industries that are so hung up on one particular packaging format. So I can see different packaging formats for different occasions, in different places, as people seek out unique experiences. And I think to Neil's point there, the segmentation, micro-segmentation, tailoring products for that, the market of one is possibly going to continue further on. As people seek differentiation, retailers on trade and off trade seek more differentiation.
Neil, is that something I guess you're also doing more work in the different channels and more opportunities in the on-trade or
definitely.
Online or whatever? Yeah.
Absolutely, but just to build on Mark's point, I think I've noticed it more than maybe the last 5 years. I think consumers are now ready for different formats within wine. I think the industry's tried to just put wine in different formats and not really actually then communicated why, what the benefit is to the consumer. I think now, with, like, for example, we've done some work with pouch and festival activity, and you get a massive uplift in sales when you actually start to tap into a consumer and a consumer need and an occasion. So I think there's going to be a lot more innovation within formats. We did some research last year with YouGov on both health and formats, because we see them as two massive emerging trends within this industry. So,
which particular formats would you put your house on? Not your house personally.
I'm not going to share that with these guys next to me. I think pouch formats actually resonates very well with consumers, and we're starting to see some move now in 50cl. I think it combines with, something like 48% of wine consumers are going to massively moderate their drinking over the next few years. So that's one of the biggest challenges to this industry. So how do you continue to engage with consumers and offer solutions that obviously still work? 50cl, I think, can work. And it's got it's more relevant. It has its place now more than I think I've ever seen the potential for 50cl, because it can do midweek drinking. You can open a bottle of wine, you don't have to drink it all. There's no wastage. It's all about 50cl two for sharing with meals. They're the sort of things that where I can see some real innovation in the industry.
I think we need a better word than pouch though, because I got an embarrassing. I went on 5 Live Radio about 3 months ago to talk about the bulk wine, talk about wine shortages, and for some reason the presenter asked me about different formats, and I said, based on previous conversations, the pouch is the way to go, which resulted in mass amusement in this newsroom, when I'm trying to explain what a pouch of wine was. But anyway, Robin, perhaps you could, obviously you're with all your various brands and developments and stuff, where do you see that, your own format growth and movement?
Yeah, I mean, like these guys, we're doing quite a bit of work where we're launching 2 or 3 different brands in cans in 18.75cl. We've gone the other way as well and done quite a bit of work with airlines on litre bottles, believe it or not, that they pour in economy. I agree with Neil. I think pouches has got a big future, and I agree that it might not even be in the retail environment. It could be somewhere else. I still come down to the fact I totally agree that other formats haven't worked in the past because they weren't marketed properly, but wine has got a sort of uniqueness about the industry, and people just seem to like the 75cl bottle. And I remember hearing a talk from Pier Paolo Petrazzi a few years ago, and I never realised that the reason why the 75cl bottle exists is because that was roughly the lung capacity of the people who used to blow the glass. So it's as basic as that. That is the only reason the bottle is that size. But I still think the vast majority of people expect a bottle of wine to look like a bottle of wine. So while we've got to be innovative, we've also got to recognise that is what most consumers want, and you've got to give them what they want. But I think the other formats will come in sort of different environments. And I think, you know, in the on-trade, they've seen a lot of success with you know, wine in keg and wine on tap, and that's somewhere that could grow. But again, that wouldn't necessarily or wouldn't be able to work in a retail environment. So it's horses for courses, really.
Dennis, is that an area which, in terms of how people are trading wine, does that have an impact on the format size, or not really, in terms of from what you would see your...
Well, we love big shipping containers, and many of them. But in saying that, you know, we've been fortunate to trade some very, very high-end wine in 1,000-litre totes across multiple countries. So, you know, there's advancements in shipping and container sizes in bulk wine all the time, and we're seeing more and more use of dual bladders in flexi in containers, two 12,000-litre flexi bags for two separate wines. Yeah, so look, there's movement in the shipping side as well for bulk wine.
Okay, I've got a whole page of questions here, but I'm happy to take questions from the floor as well if there are people who want to ask questions as we're going along. So I don't know if any hands at the moment. Did you have your hand a minute ago? Yeah, you did. Do you have a microphone from another microphone, perhaps?
Thank you, guys. Great insights. I'm going to speak on behalf of, let's say, a new supplier trying to walk into Tesco as an example. All right. So great stuff. You know, you have what you're doing is more of level 2 now. I think consumer insights, adding more value to your existing retailer and building that relationship. But what would your pitch look like for a new retail chain? Let's say, what would you say in your first 5 minutes? You know, you walk into that door, let's say, Mark, you want to pitch into Whole Foods in US, right? How would you go about that approach?
Well, first of all, I would want to understand the consumer base, who shops there, why do they shop there?
Yep. So just to pause you, like, how will buyer allow you to walk into that store? Let's just break right into that. Like, why will they allow you? You're just a new face. You know, what would you do? Like, what would you ask? What's the permission that you want from them?
Well, the States is quite different to the UK. The States, in my experience, you can often, they're very open to listening to a very short pitch, and they will very quickly assess the business potential and validity of your pitch. So if you've got hard data, and if you can quickly explain, they'll be very financially orientated, data-driven, and if you can quickly explain to them your USP, what is it that you can do for them, then that's really what they're interested in. So, you know, if you go to Whole Foods, they want, straight away, they want to know that you understand that they've just been bought by Amazon, that they have a very holistic approach to organic food, the whole well-being experience, you know, and if you know all that and you can pitch directly to their unmet needs, then they're fine.
So back to the UK, Tesco, let's say, for example, and we have an American winery trying to enter UK chains. So how will that look like? What would you say if you were a foreign supplier?
Can I pass to Neil?
Yes, sure, please.
It's again about bringing something unique. You know, if you can bring something unique or differentiated, if you can add some value over and above somebody else, then you're in a really good place.
Looks like you guys have covered pretty much everything for the retailer, but I think it's a good point. Maybe if the suppliers can come up with some new report that proves, which you guys have not done, can be a good good way to approach UK chains as well. Not taking anything away from you guys, but that can be a good study, which is proven abroad, I guess. You can prove the retailers that this worked there and can add more value here.
Can I ask any of the questions? Please just put your hands up or catch my attention. But clearly, there's this balance between creating private label brands for retailers and also creating your own brands. And I guess there's a lot of value for yourselves in creating your own brands. But supermarkets ultimately will probably want to have the private label. So can you explain that conversation and how that balance is working and who ultimately owns the IPO on many of the brands that you're developing for supermarkets?
Thanks. Yeah, it's very difficult to create a brand. You just have to look at the Nielsen stats at the moment. I think if you're talking about still wine, Barefoot and iHeart are the two sort of big entries into the top 20 of Nielsen now. They're both sort of lifestyle brands. I'm not sure how you go and create another brand, to be honest with you. Obviously, people are going to try. We're going to try. We're trying different things all the time, but it is very difficult to do that. In terms of working with retailers on private label, that's also becoming more difficult because, of course, the retailers want to own the IPO as they should. So it's more if we're owned by a company that owns 9 different wineries around Europe. So if we're talking about private label or own label, we want to supply into those private label or those own label products without necessarily owning the IPO. And behind the scenes, of course, we're trying to create something that is unique that can add to what we've done with iHeart. But it's very difficult as it should be. I mean, it's not. There is no silver bullet just to going to create a wine brand. And I think one of the weaknesses with the wine industry is that there are too many wineries and there are too many wine brands. So how are you going to go and create the next big one? It's very difficult. But I'm not saying it's impossible. It's just it's a very different question to the own label and the private label piece of business.
Yeah, our philosophy at Kingsland Drinks is about adding or enhancing value to those that we work with. So foremost, it is about creating brands or new product propositions that work for that particular channel or retailer. Our philosophy of bringing our own brands to marketplace, we will only bring a brand to the marketplace if we generally believe it offers a point of difference and it's got a real USP. Otherwise, there's no point. Because I agree with your comment. There's so many products and brands out there. I mean, you've only got to look at the Australian category. How many brands, so-called brands, look the same, are roughly the same price point, and they take up a heck of a lot of space on shelf? Do you really need them all? Question mark.
I think it can also be a function of the scale of the retailer. So, for example, we deal with some small retailers that don't want a bespoke item. They just want something X stock. And so they're not necessarily looking for a private label, whereas a large high street retailer may want an exclusive wine that they have full control over.
Any questions from the floor? No, I'll carry on. You mentioned, Mark, during your speech, the potential lack of skills or the skill gap potentially, which obviously, I guess, over the last 10 years has increased or improved. But perhaps just down the panel, where do you see skill gaps in your part of the market now? Where do you see better skills or new skills coming into the industry to make it more efficient? Mark, if you started it, you might as well have a go first.
I think there are particular things on our radar that I find particularly exciting. I think American label design in the US is much more around theatre. I think perhaps Gallo, some of their marketing skills are pretty highly advanced. I think the marketing area, but not marketing as in push, marketing as in consumer insight, following trends, giving people competitive advantages. It's really around those skills, integrating all the disciplines.
Neil?
Well, you're not going to be surprised. I mean, yeah, you've said it really. From my point of view, it's more about, you know, and I've said it maybe 2 or 3 times now on this panel. It is definitely more around consumer insight and building on that, because I still feel there's a long way for the wine industry to go. I think one of the kind of the interesting skill development areas is taste and flavour. I think we're doing some exciting work in this area, and I think I think that's an area that I think is going to be quite exciting. There's a lot more kind of fusion-based things going on out there. So I think kind of innovation around flavour and taste is an exciting area for the wine industry.
Dennis, I think I read some report recently about the top FTSE 100 companies. I think the most sought after skill is a chief technology officer. So if you're got any kids who are going to university, a CTO on your CV apparently is the one they're all looking for. So I guess with your technology platform, it's a...
I've set my son on that trajectory. Yeah. At his first day at university yesterday, and studying mathematical sciences and wanting to pursue artificial intelligence. So I hope I can benefit from that. Look, in terms of skills shortages, it's always dangerous to generalise, but I will. Look, I think there's still a deficit in the ability of wine buyers, to be perfectly honest, generally. So, and it's not necessarily their own fault. It's due to lack of market information, transparency around the market, immediacy of market information. So. And the ability to be able to use tactics and processes to pursue industry best practice in procurement. Now, obviously, with Vinex, we hope to change that. We've grown quickly. We now have buyers from 47 countries around the world that are using Vinex, interacting with us, and we're providing a more mechanised framework and more objectivity around the procurement of wine. With very efficient sampling coupled with that. So we're hoping that we will see a level of sophistication grow amongst buyers around the world, in multiple languages, across multiple jurisdictions, regions, markets. And if we can help evolve that, we think there will be a more level playing field. And we think that buyers will be in a better position to make assessments around quality and value, more so than what they are now.
Robin, you're increasing your team all the time. What kind of new skills are you looking for in your business to take you forward?
I mean, we're definitely putting a lot of focus on the digital side of the business. We've invested recently a lot in marketing, and I think we have now 2 in-house product designers who are flat out, and I can't actually imagine how we ever got on without them now that they're there. But I think, I obviously agree with everything that's been said in terms of consumer data and insight and everything, but I think one of the reasons why Cope Murray's been so successful in the last few years is the quality of our account managers. I think you can have as much data as you like, but the people who are actually doing the meetings and selling the products and presenting the brands, they have to be hungry and motivated, and they have to believe in what they're doing and enjoy what they're doing. And I think we've created an environment where they are motivated, they are hungry, they do enjoy what they're doing, and I think that shows in the results that we're getting.
We have a new chief winemaker.
And we've just recruited a winemaker. Some of you might know him, called Barry Dick. Master of Wine, used to work for Sainsbury's, used to work for McGuigan, which was a company that I also worked for in the past. And I said it right at the beginning. I mean, you cannot ignore the fact that wine has to be of a good quality for a consumer to buy it, and even at sort of relatively entry level, wine has to be good, it has to be consistent, it has to give the consumer what they want from that bottle of wine, and that is one of the reasons why we've done so well, because I think the bottle of wine that we sell, everybody is happy with, and it gives them the experience they're looking for.
And you now talk about flexi tanks over Chinese in the evening then. Just the last 5 minutes of this debate, I mean, ultimately we all need wine to sell, and we all know that there's a lot less wine in 2018 to buy and sell than there was before. Can I just ask the panel, in terms of all the big shock headlines that I probably wrote quite a lot of, what is the actual reality like, and how easy or where are you most buying your wine from? Might you start, if you don't mind?
Well, over the last 6-7 years, I think when we entered the market of buying bulk wine, quite quickly we decided to partner with specific wineries rather than perhaps play the spot market and things like that. So we've ridden various waves of foreign exchange and ups and downs, and I just think in the market we're in, it's still a good thing to do a lot of the time, to stick with people that you know that you get the right quality from, because a lot of these folks, they're farmers and they've got land and vines, and so they've got winery and equipment and people, so they're looking for long-term partners they can trust, and that's our target.
Yeah, exactly the same for us as well. It's about, establishing those relationships and looking longer term, and you're right, it's kind of riding the waves, because
But if they don't have the wine to sell, if they don't have the wine to sell, and you got someone asking for wine, you must have to play the market then.
There is definitely pressures on wine supply, definitely. But by having those longer term relationships, you're signing up to agreed quantity, and you've agreed a price, so you know that you're going to get a certain amount of wine from a certain producer at a certain price, which I think helps during these really challenging times. But whenever there are challenges, and there are challenging wine supplies in most of the countries, those other countries that don't normally get a foothold into the UK marketplace have actually got their time. So I think there's going to, you maybe see a bit more wine maybe from more Eastern European countries, for example, and we certainly know that from some of the producers that we've been working with recently.
So Dan, I see on Vinex there's a lot more forward selling availability. Is that right?
Yeah, certainly. Obviously, there's a lot less selling side of the exchange on parcels. A lot more pre-harvest buying requirements, and there's buyers that are looking for new relationships and want to bring certainty to their business. The spot market is just not there at the moment. So, look, you adapt to the conditions, but make no mistake, producers do have wine. There is wine available. It's just how they choose to allocate it, who they choose to sell it to, and the level of volumes that they have, which they're able to release to their customers. And obviously those long-term stable relationships, those are the customers that get the wine first. But make no mistake also, there are producers out there that in this period of shortage see a real opportunity to start relationships with new buyers, particularly buyers that have good profiles, that have good credit ratings. They are reliable, known buyers, and there's wineries out there that would crawl over other wineries to supply them, and they would find supply to find them in addition to their allocation to their existing customer base. So, look, it's a dynamic market. It's transformational. There's no doubt about that. But the great thing is that it's speeding up. The great thing from my perspective and Vinex is that it's speeding up globalisation. And there's more and more wine coming from Eastern Europe now. It's good varietal wine, represents great value. There's producers there young producers that are very outward looking. So that's really exciting. But we're dealing with a double whammy at the moment. We're dealing with short vintages, 300 million cases out of the system, and we're also dealing with high demand, good solid consumer demand growing in the domestic market in the US, and of course very, very high demand for reds out of Asia, and particularly China. So on the supply side it's hurting, on the demand side there's no shortage of demand. So very interesting market, and we see that our e-tender manager on the exchange is being well used to ferret out supply and to begin to have new relationships and for those buyers to secure additional supply and bring 2 or 3 suppliers to their armoury rather than perhaps one main partner or incumbent that they've had historically.
Robin, where have you found you having to change your supply, or you look at how do you answer that question?
We do a lot of supply within the Henkel Group because they own so many wineries. But we still buy wine from California and Australia and Chile and New Zealand and Argentina. But Eastern Europe's been mentioned a couple of times. Henkel also own a winery called Torlay, which is the biggest winery in Hungary. So that's been an amazing resource for us. I think last year we probably took about 8 million bottles of wine from them, when you think in 2013 that we weren't dealing with them. And we've also got a very good partnership with Crămali Rekas in Romania, and we do a lot of volume through them. So Eastern Europe's been mentioned, but Eastern Europe is a big thing, and it's not just wine at entry level. They're both Romania and Hungary, for me, are making very good wine at sort of mid to premium level, which also represents great value. So definitely one to watch.
So Hall 8 or whatever it is at Provine will be a lot more busier than previous years, perhaps.
And they didn't have a short vintage.
And they didn't, yeah. Okay, so have we any more volunteers from the floor? Questions? No? You happy to that? Okay, well, I'll just give them one. It's always customary in these panels to leave the panel with one cheeky question at the end, so I won't disappoint. So if I was able to give you £1 million to invest in a part of your business, or where would you choose to invest it? Mark, I'm not saying you're a slow thinker, but I'm just saying I'll go. Robin, you're the fastest thinker here. Go on.
It would definitely be something to do with the digital side of the business.
Well, we've invested double that, £2 million, and we've invested in the digital side of the business.
£1 million, eh? What could I do? I can already see my boss going, "Oh my God, don't let a marketing director loose on £1 million." I think I'd agree. I think digital, I think, is obviously a key area that's going to absolutely not just game change the wine industry, but it's going to game change how we engage and how we shop in the next 5 years. I mean, there's some pretty incredible statistics when you see like something like 70% of all purchases will be made through a digital device literally in another 5 to 7 years' time. I mean, that's crazy. So I think investment definitely in that area, I think, because it's an area that's going to potentially change our industry.
100% consumer insight. Yeah, we hired a consumer insight guy 4 years ago, and every year his budget doubles.
Okay, well, you can tell I'm a journalist. I think £1 million is a lot of money, but then
I couldn't say consumer insight because we've already invested quite a lot of money in consumer insight, so I definitely couldn't say that.
Please, you all say digital, because obviously you can all invest in online trade journalism like The Buyer. We're very, very good of you. Okay, well, I'll call an end to this session. Thanks a lot for everyone for your time. Mark, Neil, Dennis, Robin, and everybody here. And just to say, obviously the exhibition floor is open now, and then the 1 o'clock will be kicking off for the afternoon conference. So thank you very much indeed.